The courthouse stood like a scar against the dawn, its timbers blackened by weather and time. Wind carried the smell of dust and horses, rattling loose shingles as if the land itself whispered judgment. She stood on the steps, still as stone, her shadow stretched across the dirt street like a warning. The gavel in her hand looked out of place, too small for a fist that once gripped iron chains while the lash tore her back open. She did not flinch at the memory. It came unbidden, same as it always did in the hour before sunrise, when silence presses hardest and ghosts walk nearest. The people of the town called her judge now, though they had once called her worse. Their respect had teeth. It was not born of affection but of fear, and fear kept the peace better than prayer. Her face, drawn tight by years of holding everything in, revealed nothing. Only her eyes betrayed her, gray and restless, like storm clouds that refused to break. The square before her filled slowly with townsfolk, come to witness the day's judgment. They never admitted it aloud, but they enjoyed these mornings. The law was not a paper in a book. It was her voice echoing from the bench, shaping the world in words as sharp as spurs. Children pressed against skirts, wide-eyed. Men leaned on rifles with casual hands that weren't casual at all. Even in times of order, the frontier trusted violence more than law. She took her seat, with creaking under her weight, and felt the hush spread across the crowd. A man stood before her, wrist bound, his hat lost somewhere along the night's ride. A cattle thief, guilty beyond doubt. His eyes darted like a cornered coyote, wild but knowing the trap had already snapped shut. She remembered the sting of rope, the burn of the whip, and the merciless stares of neighbors when she herself had stood condemned. She remembered how no one had spoken for her. The crowd had thirsted for her pain the way they thirsted now for this man's humiliation. Her words fell like iron nails. For theft of another's herd, I sentence you to 1 year's labor in chains. May the sweat you spill pay the debt you owe. The thief sagged at the knees, a mixture of relief and despair, for it was not the noose. Murmurs rippled through the square. Some wanted harsher punishment. Others nodded grimly, satisfied. The sentence was not about cattle. It was about reminding them that order had teeth, and she was its bite. She struck the gavel, the sound like a gunshot in the morning air. The thief was led away, boots dragging in the dirt. Her eyes lingered on him a moment longer, then drifted to the horizon. Black clouds were gathering there, bruised with thunder, heavy with omen. By midday the crowd had thinned, leaving only stragglers and the curious. Among them was a man who leaned in the shadow of the saloon, hat pulled low, whiskey flask in hand. He had the look of someone who once commanded respect, but now kept company only with ghosts. A gunslinger, washed up, his eyes too tired for violence, yet too restless for peace. He watched the judge with something between curiosity and sorrow, as though he recognized in her the same ruin he carried in his chest. When her gaze touched him, he lifted the flask in a mocking salute. She did not acknowledge him, but she filed the sight away. People like him never drifted in by accident. Later that evening, when the lamps were lit in the courthouse and the wind rattled the shutters, a girl crept into the room. No one had seen her slip inside. Her dress was ragged, her hair tangled from days on the trail, and her eyes sharp as flint. She could not have been more than 12. Yet her face carried the expression of someone who already knew the cruelty of being unwanted. She said nothing at first, just stood there in the half-light, waiting. The judge set down her pen, studied the girl, and spoke with measured calm. This is no place for strays. The girl did not flinch. I can read. Can you? The judge raised a brow. Few children in town could, and fewer still with skin the color of dusted bronze, the mark of 2 worlds that both rejected her. The girl recited a line from a book lying open on the desk. Her voice was steady, proud, daring the judge to dismiss her. Something shifted inside the woman then, not warmth, not yet, but recognition. She had once been that child, desperate to prove her worth in a world eager to crush it. Words will not shield you, the judge said quietly. Not here. They will if I use them right, the girl replied. The judge allowed the faintest trace of smile, then masked again. We will see. The night deepened, and the girl curled against a corner bench, refusing to leave. The judge let her stay. Some battles weren't worth fighting, and perhaps this was a battle she'd already lost the moment the child opened her mouth. The town slept uneasy in the growl of distant thunder. The judge lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams, listening to the storm build on the horizon. Her scars burned as if the lash had struck her anew. Memory rose unbidden. The square, the rope, the eyes of the townsfolk, the sharp crack of leather against flesh. And above it all, the face of man she had once loved, the man who had fled as the first lash fell, leaving her broken in the dirt. She clenched her fist against the memory. That was years past, buried under layers of duty and silence. Yet storms have a way of dragging bones from shallow graves. When dawn came again, she stood once more on the courthouse steps, the girl watching from the shadows, the gunslinger still haunting the saloon's porch. The town stirred with restless talk, whispers running quicker than the wind. Riders had been seen on the ridge at sunset, hard men, lean with hunger, armed heavy, and at their head, it was said, rode a figure from another life. The judge did not speak of it, but she felt the weight pressed down upon her, the same weight she had carried since the day of the whip. Fate was circling back, slow as a buzzard, patient as the prairie itself. She tightened her grip on the gavel, steadying herself. She had clawed her way from pain to power, but the past does not forgive. It waits. The clouds above were black now, swollen and electric. The land held its breath, and the town did too, sensing what she already knew. The storm was not far off. It was riding toward her, and when it arrived, judgment would not be hers to give, but hers to face. The saloon smelled of tobacco, spilled whiskey, and stale sweat, the kind of place where the air never cleared, only grew thicker. The gunslinger sat at the far table, hat tipped low, his hand hovering near a bottle more often than his pistol. Once, men spoke his name with both fear and respect. Now they spoke it only in whispers, as if reminding themselves of the ghost that hadn't realized it was dead. He watched the judge walk past the swinging doors without turning his head, but his jaw tightened around the rim of the glass. She did not go to him. She had no reason to, not yet. Instead, she spoke with the barkeep, gathering the rumors that had spread since dawn. Riders had been spotted again. Dust trails curling along the ridge, more than a handful, fewer than an army, but dangerous all the same. The townsfolk were already sharpening their fear into anger, muttering about fortifying the jail, about gathering rifles. She listened, measured, weighed each word like evidence in a case. The girl was with her, silent as a shadow, eyes darting everywhere, soaking in the room. Patrons noticed her. Some sneered, others looked away. A half-blood child was a reminder of borders blurred, of sins whispered and punished. Yet she held her chin high, as if daring anyone to spit. The judge had not told her to follow, but the child moved as though tethered by invisible thread. When the judge left the counter, the gunslinger finally spoke. His voice was sandpaper, rough with disuse. "Storm's coming." She paused. "I know." His gaze lifted, eyes pale and rimmed red from sleepless nights. "I've seen that kind of dust before. Men riding hungry, men riding hard." "Are you warning me?" she asked. "Or yourself?" A ghost of a smile tugged his lip. "Makes no difference." The child narrowed her eyes at him, protective without knowing why. The judge placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "If you got wisdom worth sharing, speak in my courtroom, not to the bottom of a bottle." The words landed heavier than a bullet. He said nothing more, only turned the flask in his hand, staring at the way the light caught the metal as if searching for answers there. By nightfall, the town had turned restless. Lamps burned longer, shutters closed tighter. In the square, men argued about raising a posse, about stringing rope before law could tangle them in hesitation. The judge listened from her steps, her presence silencing some, but not all. They wanted vengeance ready before crime had even been proven. She thought of the whip, of how easy it was for people to punish first and justify later. "Law is not vengeance," she said, her voice steady against their clamor. "It is the difference between survival and savagery." An older rancher spat in the dirt. "Law is just a word, Judge. A rope speaks louder." Her gaze cut through him until he looked away. "Then it is my duty to make the word louder still." The gunslinger lingered nearby, listening. He leaned against a post, arms folded, studying her like a man weighing his own place in her world. For the first time in years, he thought perhaps his pistol hand might serve more than memory. He didn't say so. He wasn't ready, but the thought settled in him like a coal waiting for kindling. Inside the courthouse that night, the girl practiced her letters by lamplight, scratching ink across parchment with clumsy strokes. The judge watched her in silence, remembering her own youth, how knowledge had been both shield and burden. She wondered if she was saving a child or binding her to another form of exile. "Why do they hate me?" the girl asked without looking up. The judge closed her eyes, feeling the question cut deeper than the lash ever had. "Because they fear what they cannot own. Then I'll never belong." "No," the judge said, voice softer now. "But you can lead, and when you lead, belonging becomes something others seek from you." The child thought about this, then returned to her letters with fierce determination, as if every crooked mark on the page was an act of defiance. The storm broke before dawn, rain hammering rooftops, wind screaming through cracks. Thunder rolled like cannon fire. The judge did not sleep. She stood at her window, staring at the sheets of water slanting across the prairie, wondering if the storm masked riders approaching or drove them back. She felt the ache of old scars deep under her skin, each flash of lightning dragging memory forward. When the storm eased, so too did the silence. Hoofbeats echoed through the waking town. Riders at last, cutting through the mud, their presence undeniable. Townsfolk rushed to windows, rifles clutched in trembling hands. The judge stepped outside, face unreadable, cloak whipping in the wind. The riders did not enter the square. They lingered at the ridge, black silhouettes against the gray horizon. But even from that distance, she knew the way one of them sat his horse, the tilt of his shoulders, the quiet defiance in the way he did not move when the others shifted. Her breath caught, though she kept her face still. The man who had once been everything, the one who had run, the one whose absence had been branded into her flesh, had returned, older now, harder, but the outline was unmistakable. Her heart hammered, not with longing, not with hate, but with something raw, something that had no name. The child clutched her sleeve, whispering, "Who is he?" "No one," the judge said, though the word felt like ash on her tongue. The gunslinger had joined her on the steps, his eyes narrowing as he followed her gaze. He said nothing, but his jaw set, as if bracing for a fight he had not yet agreed to but already knew was his. The riders turned after a long moment and vanished back into the storm-drenched hills. The town exhaled in ragged relief, but relief was not what the judge felt. The past had not simply returned, it had announced itself. The circle was closing, slow and merciless. She stepped back inside, the child trailing close, the gunslinger watching her with eyes that knew too much. Behind her calm mask, her pulse throbbed like war drums. The storm had passed, but the true tempest had only just begun. Dust rose before the riders like smoke from a funeral pyre, curling upward into the afternoon sky. The town went quiet as the gang entered, their horses lathered, eyes wild. No shots were fired, no words shouted, yet the silence held more menace than gunpowder. The judge stood on the courthouse steps, watching every movement with the stillness of a hawk. She felt the land tighten, every heartbeat of the townsfolk trembling through the ground. The gang dismounted with the casual arrogance of men accustomed to taking what they pleased. Their boots struck the earth in unison, a drumbeat of unease. At their center was a man she had known, though years had carved his face into something harsher, as though stone had been whittled down to jagged bone. His eyes caught hers, and for a moment the world shrank to nothing but that gaze. Memory screamed behind her calm mask. His hand once warm in hers, then the sudden emptiness as he vanished in the crowd the day the lash split her skin. He said nothing. Neither did she. The air between them was thick with unfinished sentences, with 1,000 nights of wondering why. The gunslinger emerged from the saloon, stepping into the square, hand hovering near his holster. The crowd shifted, nervous, sensing the kind of stillness that precedes violence. His gaze flicked from the outlaw to the judge, then back again. He understood something unspoken passed between them, something that would decide whether this town would burn. The child stood near the courthouse doors, eyes wide but unflinching. She studied the outlaw as though measuring whether he was myth or man. For her, there was no history, only the raw presence of danger. But she read the judge's stillness, saw the way her shoulders tightened ever so slightly, and she understood. This was not a stranger. This was the wound beneath the scar. At last, the outlaw spoke. His voice was deeper, rougher, but the echo of familiarity twisted the knife in her chest. I came for talk, not trouble. The words hung heavy, and though his gang shifted uneasily, none of them contradicted him. Then talk, she answered, her voice steady as iron. A murmur rippled through the crowd. People wanted him gone, dead if possible, but the judge had claimed the ground with her calm. She turned, motioned, and the courthouse doors creaked open. Inside, the air smelled of old wood and ink, the solemn scent of law. The outlaw stepped in, leaving his men outside, the gunslinger following close enough to intervene, and the child slipping silently behind, unwilling to be left out of whatever storm was about to break. The doors shut. Rain began to fall again, pattering against the roof as if the heavens themselves leaned close to listen. He removed his hat, sat on the bench before her desk. You haven't changed. Her laugh was sharp, bitter. No. Look closer. Scars run deeper than wrinkles. He winced, though his pride masked it quickly. I never wanted. You wanted survival. She cut in, and you chose yours over mine. The gunslinger shifted, uneasy with the intimacy of the words. He had expected threats, not confessions sharpened into blades. The child, wide-eyed, absorbed every syllable as though it were scripture. The outlaw met the judge's gaze, unflinching now. If I had stayed, they'd have killed us both. They killed me anyway, she said. Her voice did not rise, but the truth inside it struck harder than any shout. For a long moment, there was only rain, only silence. The gunslinger finally broke it. If you came for forgiveness, you won't find it here. If you came for blood, you'll choke on it. The outlaw's eyes flicked toward him, recognizing a man hollowed by sins of his own. And what are you to her? Another ghost who can't put down his gun. The judge raised a hand, silencing them both. Enough. This town will not bleed for our history. But history had its own voice, and it spoke loud that night. A shout came from outside, followed by the crack of a rifle. The doors flew open, and a deputy staggered in, blood soaking his shirt, eyes wild with terror. One of them's dead, he gasped before collapsing. Chaos erupted. The gang outside bellowed, weapons drawn, rage spilling into the square. The townsfolk answered with rifles from windows, the first exchange of gunfire shredding the fragile calm. The outlaw's face hardened, the mask of survival snapping back into place. This wasn't me. The judge believed him, though her heart cursed the truth. The storm had arrived faster than she had braced for. Call them off, she said. They don't listen to calls, he answered grimly. Not when blood's been spilled. The gunslinger drew his revolver, eyes sharp now, old instincts alive. Then we fight. No. The judge snapped, voice cutting to the thunder of panic outside. We hold. The child pressed against the wall, trembling but refusing to run. Her small fists clenched, her jaw set, as though she could will herself into being stronger, older, enough to matter. The judge saw it and felt a surge of something fierce and protective. She looked at the outlaw, searching his face of the man she had once trusted. She found only fragments. If you want talk, then prove it now. Stop this before it burns us all. His jaw tightened, eyes flicking toward the doors, toward the chaos. A decision balancing him, fragile as glass. Finally, he pulled his revolver, not to aim, but to set it down on her desk. The sound of metal on wood was louder than the gunfire outside. I'll stand trial, he said, but not for this. Her heart clenched. Outside, the night roared with violence, but inside, something even more dangerous had been set in motion. The judge reached for the gavel, her fingers brushing the scarred wood, the weight of memory pressing down. Then you'll have it. Trial at dawn. The gunslinger stared at him, disbelieving. The child's eyes widened with awe. The outlaw's gaze never left hers, the faintest flicker of relief and defiance warring in his expression. Thunder shook the courthouse, and the doors rattled on their hinges as if the storm demanded entry. The judge struck the gavel once, the sound carrying like a gunshot into the night. The trial was no longer about law. It was about ghosts, about scars, about whether the past would be buried or if it would rise to claim them all. Dawn came bruised and gray, the kind of light that felt less like morning and more like the fading of something once strong. The courthouse loomed against the sky, lanterns guttering in the wind. Townsfolk gathered despite the hour, their faces drawn with suspicion, hunger, and the kind of fear that sharpens into cruelty. They wanted blood. Whether it came from the outlaw's body or another man's did not matter. The storm of the night before had passed, but its violence clung to them, restless and unresolved. The judge stepped onto the bench with the same calm she had carried through 1,000 storms, though inside her chest of fire burned raw and unsteady. The outlaw stood before her, unbound yet cornered, his revolver surrendered, his eyes fixed only on her. The gunslinger lingered nearby, hand on his weapon, gaze sharp, though his body swayed with the weariness of too many nights haunted by ghosts. The girl sat in the shadows near the wall, refusing to leave, her small form coiled tight like a spring. She had no place in law or trial, yet she had chosen one for herself. The judge struck the gavel, and the murmur outside hushed to a low, tense silence. This court is convened. The charge before us is murder. The outlaw raised his chin. I didn't slit that deputy's throat. Her voice did not soften. Then speak truth before those who doubt you. He did not falter. My men act wild, but they act under my name. If one of them did this, then the fault rests here. He tapped his chest with a hardened finger. But not my hand. I didn't take that man's life. The crowd muttered, some scoffing, others nodding despite themselves. Truth, when spoken plain, has a weight few can ignore. The gunslinger stepped forward, requested to speak. His voice, usually rough with bitterness, carried strange steadiness now. I've seen men kill for less than a coin. I've been that man. And I've seen others blamed because someone wanted them gone. This outlaw here, he paused, the word scraping his throat. He's guilty of many things, but I don't see his hand in last night's blood. It was not absolution, but it was testimony. The judge studied him, saw in his eyes a reflection of a man fighting his own past by speaking for another. Redemption, perhaps, worn and fragile. The child stood then, voice trembling but fierce. He didn't kill the deputy. I watched him the whole time. Gasps rippled through the room. The judge turned sharply, her heart pounding. You were there? She demanded. The girl nodded, jaw set. I saw him. He never left the room. He was talking to you. The judge felt the truth of it slam into her like a hammer. She had known, deep down, but hearing it spoken by the child made denial impossible. The outlaw's innocence in that matter was clear, but innocence in one crime did not erase betrayal in another. Then what do you claim? She asked him, her voice low, tight. He breathed deeply, his shoulders sagging as though the weight of years pressed down at once. I claim what I should have said long ago. I left you. I left you when you needed me most. I told myself it was survival, but truth is I was afraid. Afraid of dying, afraid of losing everything. I ran, and I've carried that shame ever since. That's my guilt. That's the rope that's hung around my neck every night since. The words broke the air like thunder. Even the crowd fell silent. His confession was not the plea of a man avoiding death, but the burden of one too tired to keep carrying silence. The judge's hand trembled on the gavel. Scars burned across her back, the memory of lashes searing as though newly drawn. She saw herself again, bound and bleeding, the crowd jeering, and the space where he should have stood empty. Rage surged, hot and blinding. Yet beneath it flickered something more dangerous, understanding. She had built her life on law, on the rigid strength of right and wrong. But love and betrayal did not bend so easily. They clung, staining everything. The crowd began to shout again, demanding a verdict, demanding the closure only violence seemed to bring. The gunslinger's hand twitched near his holster, sensing danger in the restless bodies. The child gripped the bench, eyes wide, holding her breath as though the world might crack apart with the judge's next words. At last the judge rose. Her voice carried clear and sharp, louder than the storm outside. For the crime of murder, I find you not guilty. The blood of that deputy does not stain your hand. The crowd erupted, outrage boiling over. She struck the gavel hard. Once, twice, the sound cracking like rifle fire. Silence crept back in, but it was a fragile silence, teeth bared. She turned her eyes on the outlaw, the man who had broken her life in two. Her words came like steel. But you are guilty of abandoning me to the lash, of leaving me to carry scars alone. The law has no name for such a crime, but I do, and I pass the sentence. Exile, you will leave this town at dawn and never return. If you do, it will be the rope that greets you. The outlaw closed his eyes, the faintest nod bowing his head. There was no fight in him, no protest. Perhaps he had come seeking this judgment all along. The crowd roared again, fury unsated, but the gunslinger drew his revolver, the barrel raised not in threat, but in warning. His voice cut through the noise, steady and final. You heard the judge. Law stands, or chaos swallows us all. Choose. Something in his stance, the weight of a man who had killed enough to know when to mean it, stilled them. The fury ebbed into muttering, into resentful silence. When dawn broke fully, the outlaw rode from town, shoulders hunched, his men trailing behind like shadows scattered by morning light. The judge watched from the steps, the child beside her, the gunslinger silent at her back. Her heart twisted, tore between relief and a hollow ache that felt like grief. The town would tell the story differently. She knew. They would claim they had wanted him gone all along. They would say she was cold, unbending, merciless. And perhaps all of it was true. But the truth she carried was her own. The past had returned, demanded judgment, and she had not bowed. The gunslinger stepped closer, his voice quiet. You spared him. I spared myself, she answered. The child slipped her hand into the judge's, small but steady. The woman looked down at her, saw determination burning in those young eyes. Found family, forged in fire. Perhaps this was what the lash had failed to take, the power to shape what came next. The morning sun broke through the clouds at last, spilling gold across the town. The judge lifted her face to it, scars burning in the light, not with pain now but with proof. She had endured, she had judged, she had chosen. The prairie wind carried the last echoes of hoofbeats away, leaving only silence, vast and unbroken. In that silence, she found a measure of peace. The whip had written her past, but the gavel had carved her future. And when the next storm came, as it always would, she would not face it alone.